All right, so we got a Fuji mystery box here we're going to open up. I'm hoping it's a replacement for the X-T3, which I assume they would call an X-T4. It does have a black box, and it is an X-T200. All right, so that's either 50 times as good as an X-T4, or it's the replacement for the X-T100. Welcome back, Deep Your View TV viewers. Chris Nichols here, and you've just seen the announcement for the brand new Fuji X-T200, officially replacing the X-T100 camera. And it looks like there's actually a lot of exciting new features that I want to talk about. They have actually made this a substantial upgrade. Now, first off, I know that we are still inside. Absolutely, Alberta is still under an incredibly crushing cold snap, and we will die if we go outside. But, well, we brave the cold to get you some sample photos anyway, so that's a lie. And, you know, the X-T200, Fuji is absolutely aiming this really at the entry-level photographer, you know, the smartphone user that wants something better, or somebody who wants to start learning photography and get all the manual controls down pat. And in that regard, it does represent a very good price point, although keep in mind that we also reviewed the Fuji X-A7, and that camera is also meant to do the same thing. So we're also going to talk about some of the differences between those two bodies. Now, there's actually a lot to like about the older Fuji X-T100 body, although it was cheap and cheap feeling in hand, to be completely honest. On the outside, superficially, though, it did bring all the nice good looks from the more expensive X-T cameras above it, and so it tied you into that whole Fuji aesthetic. You really felt like you had a sexy camera in your hands. I mean, it was a really nice platform for people to get started. Now, the X-T200 carries a lot of that same aesthetic over. It looks very similar. You know, from the outside, it does look quite beautiful, and I do like that we've got three nice sexy colors: a dark silver, a brighter regular silver chrome finish, and a champagne gold finish as well. You get a lot of choices there. But we do also get a redesigned grip, and that's more than just aesthetics. It does feel a little bit more comfortable, although it does still have a very plasticky, cheap kind of feel, especially on the back of it. And while we're on the topic of light and plasticky, the X-T200 has actually lost 80 grams from an already very lightweight X-T100 camera. It's now only 370 grams. That's a sixth of a Nikkor Noct lens. That's pretty incredible for weight savings. But it's not just aesthetic changes. We also have something major under the hood. And the first thing I want to talk about is we have the new 24 megapixel sensor that you would find in the Fuji X-A7. This steps up the low light game over the X-T100. It's less rolling shutter, and it does give us full 100% phase detect autofocus coverage, 425 selectable points. So that's a really big improvement. Now, of course, there's no inbuilt image stabilization in a camera at this price point. That makes sense, but there are some features that are worth noting. First off, I like that they've improved the menu. So we have a My Menu function now, as well. Just like the X-A7, I can touch in the menu to select things, and we have the X-A7 Simple menu, which is very icon-based, and that can be very easy for people to get into as well. We have the same ubiquitous NPW 126S battery. We're finding this in pretty much all Fuji cameras now. Now, one of the features that we really loved on the X-A7, we're happy to see has transferred over to the X-T200, and that's the back LCD panel. First off, it's a fully articulating mount. We love that. It's not the classic 3:2 ratio you normally see. It's the 16:9 ratio, almost 2.8 million dots. I mean, it's a really nice back panel with full touchscreen interface. Now, photographers are going to like this because you still get your touch interfaces on the side of the panel without cluttering your view for your photos. And if you're into video, you're going to love this for vlogging. I mean, it's brilliant for that. So overall, really, really nice feature that we see carry over. Now, one of the features that is missing on the X-A7, by far its biggest drawback, is the lack of an EVF. And that's what the X-T200 largely brings to the table over the X-A7. We love having that option. On a technical spec standpoint, it's not going to blow you away. It's 0.62 magnification, 2.36 million dots. I mean, it's absolutely bog standard for this price point. But on a bright sunny day, you're going to love that you have it. Ooh, and here you have some samples of Fuji's light trail mode. We didn't play with this before, but this is carried over from the X-A7, and we absolutely love low light exposure composite modes. There you go. Okay, but here's the biggest improvement, especially over the X-T100, which really had fairly poor autofocus performance. The X-T200 is right up there with the latest Fuji cameras for autofocus technology. Face and eye detection tracking is way better, picks up faces from far distances away, and I think if you're doing family stuff, you're really going to find this absolutely fantastic to have. But it's not all wonderful. I mean, we have improved our shooting speed from 6 frames per second to 8 frames per second. That's respectable, but the buffer rate still seems to be very limited. Now, we can't fully test this, it's pre-production, but it cuts out pretty fast. And I think if you're doing family stuff, that's okay, but if you're doing wildlife or sports, you're gonna wanna look at a different package. And the disappointments don't end there. I mean, we've got a very powerful processor in this camera, but we still are missing out on some really interesting Fuji simulation modes. We have most of them, but we're not getting Eterna. That's not just for video people. Some people like it for stills. We're not getting Acros, which is arguably their nicest monochromatic mode. And we're not getting the new Fuji Pro Neg, which is their sort of traditional looking negative. These are all really fun simulation modes, and I cannot see any good reason why they'd be missing from this camera. It does seem like market segmentation. We did just do a video on that, and I do wish that Fuji would update that. But it's not all doom and gloom, because when it comes to video features, there's some huge improvements, so Jordan's going to talk about those next.
Hey everyone, it's Jordan in front of this red gelled backdrop because I haven't invested in an RGB light yet to talk about the X-T200 for video. Now, the X-T100 was a pretty huge disappointment. It shot 4K at 15 frames per second, which was pretty unusable. The autofocus was really rough as well, but we were very impressed with the XA7. That got you 4K at usable frame rates up to 30 frames per second, and the image quality was really nice on it. I also loved the big, fully articulating screen, which is thankfully still included on the X-T200. Now, there are some drawbacks to it. When we're shooting 4K, 24, 25, 30 frames per second, you do have a 15-minute cutoff per clip. As well, you might have noticed that there's no headphone jack on the side of this camera, but fortunately Fuji's done something really clever here. They actually include in the box a USB headphone adapter. Now, I know a lot of people picked up the X-T30 and had trouble finding adapters that would work. It's great, Fuji gives you a nice passive one that'll work right in the box. As well, we don't have one of those annoying 2.5mm mic jacks that require an adapter for pretty much every other mic out there. Now we get a standard 3.5mm jack. My main concern, though, is we've got these great audio inputs. It's quite flexible. What's the preamp like? Because the XA7 had a pretty terrible one, and unfortunately, we're not seeing a real improvement here. I mean, listen to this at minus 15 decibels gain. So to get this kind of audio quality, I'm running it at minus 27 decibels gain, and there it's fairly usable. But remember, if you're grabbing a microphone, it should be one that sends a pretty hot signal into this camera. Another real advantage of the X-T200 over the XA7 is that this is capable of recording 120 frames per second in 1080 up from 100 frames per second. So if your kid's doing something awesome, you'll be able to capture it in beautiful 120 frame per second slow-mo, and the quality is actually quite good on that. Fuji's been doing a really nice job with their video autofocus performance, and the X-T200 is no exception to that. It does a nice kind of natural focus pull whenever your subject moves closer and further from the subject. I'm not crazy about the interface, however. I do really like their face and eye detect while recording video, but you really do want to set a dedicated focus position and keep that on top of your subject for the best results. If it detects a face and your subject is moved outside the focus point, often it'll go find another focus point or get confused and hunt a little bit. One thing Fujifilm's been talking up a lot is their new digital gimbal mode, and this actually uses a gyro sensor in the camera to give you more consistent results. However, it does still have some of the problems of electronic image stabilization in that it works best when you're using fast shutter speed, so you'll get very little bounce in your footage, but you will get a jerkier sense of motion when you're using that. As well, this mode is only available in 1080p, so it could be nice to have in some situations, but I don't think I'd use it very often. If you're looking for a really capable video camera for under $1,000, I think the X-T200 would be my top pick right now. You get some of Fuji's lovely film simulation, so the straight out of camera image is beautiful. You get really nice autofocus with it, and it's one of the only cameras in this price point that'll give you a headphone jack if you do want to monitor your audio. Just make sure you're sending a very strong mic signal into this, otherwise those preamps can kind of burn you. Now you might be wondering, why would I ever step up to the Fuji X-T30? And if you're more serious about the image, it might be worthwhile. There you're going to get a Turna, you're going to get access to F-Log, so you can really grade that footage, and you can even send a 10-bit signal out through the HDMI to an external recorder. However, if you're not going to use any of those fancy features, grab an X-T200, get a beautiful screen, and a very usable camera at a great price.
So in conclusion, the X-T200 package seems to be a really good setup for the money. It's quite powerful, it looks nice, it does handle well, and so I think for the money you have a really good winner here. We're absolutely going to revisit this camera when we start comparing against some of the other entry-level kits on the market so we can see how it compares and give you a bit of a buyer's guide. Now, I could see it if you wanted F-Log video recording or if you wanted a longer buffer to do more, intense sports and action, then the X-T30 makes sense. Now, if you don't feel you need those things, I think that this camera is a really good package. And the only thing I want to really finish off with is, well, where does it leave the Fuji X-A7? If you look at the price point, we're really talking about a minor price difference. And I think the X-T200 gives you way more for your money. There is some potential that the Fuji X-A7 might have some firmware updates that bring it more in line with some of the video features, for example, the X-T200 kit has. But in the past, where I would say, yes, I'm very confident Fuji will do that, in today's market, I don't know if it's going to happen. I know personally for me, I wouldn't go to an X-T100 even if it was a really good deal. The autofocus isn't there. And if I had an X-A7 and an X-T200 on the shelf to choose from, I think for the small amount of money, the X-T200 is a way better kit. So as usual, leave comments below, check out Instagram and Twitter, and please subscribe to the channel. I know a lot of you viewers out there check us out on dpreview.com and get that through that source. And dear God, don't stop doing that. Of course, we absolutely appreciate that. That's awesome. But if you could also just click the subscribe button, it would be really helpful for us. We'd really appreciate that. Thanks so much for joining us. Please subscribe. We'll see you guys all very soon.